is in fact dangerously high, which is bad because we are almost certainly going to blow past 2 degrees Celsius. There's some reason to believe, a recent study said that even if we stopped our climate emissions tomorrow, we're still going to get more than 3 degrees this century just from momentum from the previous emissions. But stopping at 2 degrees now would take a level of global coordination and ambition that is nowhere in evidence. So a lot of climate scientists don't really want to tell you this because they don't want to depress you, but I'm just a blogger, so I'm happy to depress you. 2 degrees Celsius is probably off the table. So then the question becomes, well, what does it look like if temperature goes higher than that? What would, say, 4 degrees Celsius look like? Oddly, there hadn't really been a lot of concerted scientific attention to that question because climate scientists honestly thought we wouldn't do that to ourselves. But we are doing it to ourselves. So in 2009, several climate change research groups in England drew together a group of scientists, commissioned some papers, and had them really take a hard look for the first time. What would 4 degrees Celsius look like? There were a lot of papers, a lot of equations, a lot of talk and complexity. I have helpfully paraphrased it here for you to make it easier to grasp. 4 degrees Celsius temperature rise would look ugly. Among other things, that would be the hottest the Earth has been in 30 million years. Sea levels would rise at least 3 to 6 feet, and this excludes some really tail-end possibilities, but 3 to 6 feet at least. And persistent drought would cover about 40% of the currently occupied land on Earth, which would wreak havoc on agriculture in East Asia, in Africa, South America, Western US. All this combined would produce hundreds of millions of people who had been driven from their homes, either by their cities being swamped by sea level rise or by hunger or by all the attendant ills that come along with those things. And to boot, probably somewhere around half of the known species on Earth would go extinct. This question of pinning down the exact number of species is very difficult. This is very much an approximation, but some substantial chunk of life on Earth would be wiped out. The final bit of bad news, that's not true, there's more bad news to come. A middle bit of bad news is that according to a recent paper by the International Energy Agency, we are currently on track, if we keep doing what we're now doing, if we go on with business as usual, as it's called, we are now on track for 6 degrees Celsius temperature rise this century. Something, 5 to 7. These are obviously estimations. So if 4 degrees is hell on Earth, I'll let your imaginations fill in the blanks on 6 degrees. But one danger that comes up when we contemplate going this high with our temperature is the possibility that climate change will become irreversible. I think when people typically think about climate change, they think, oh, temperature is going to rise X amount, circumstances will change, some places will get warmer, some places will get wetter, we'll adjust, we'll move our farms around, people will migrate from one city to another, we'll get resettled, and we'll go on with life. The really dangerous possibility is that what are called, the Earth has several of what are called positive feedback systems. So for instance, in Siberia, there's this permanent ice, the permafrost, and it contains a bunch of methane in it. As it melts, it releases that methane. The methane causes more warming, which melts more ice, which releases more methane. It's a self-sustaining process. Or sea ice melts. Ice is white, it reflects energy. When it melts, it becomes dark blue and absorbs more energy, which heats the oceans, which melts more ice, which creates more dark surfaces. You see, there's a number of these systems that are self-perpetuating, and the danger The great danger of climate change that towers above all these other more specific dangers is that these positive feedback systems will take on a momentum of their own that becomes unstoppable. Human beings will lose any ability to control it at all, even if we stop all our climate emissions on a dime. Will that happen at 2 degrees? Probably not, though there's a real chance of it, and there's a lot of debate about that. Will it happen at 4 degrees? Well, it looks a lot more likely at 4 degrees. Will it happen at 6 degrees? Almost certainly. So if we continue on our present course, climate change will probably take on a life of its own, spiral out of control, and according to a recent paper, by 2300, we could see temperature rise of up to 12 degrees centigrade. Now, if that happened, something like half the Earth's currently inhabited land would become too hot to survive on. And when I say too hot to survive on, I don't mean it's difficult to grow beans or air conditioning bills are inconveniently high. I mean, if you go outside, you die of hotness. I mean, places that were an average of 80 degrees Fahrenheit will now be an average of 170, 180 degrees Fahrenheit. Literally too hot for human beings to go outside and survive. So, will there still be human civilization under those circumstances? Who knows? I mean, maybe we'll live in underground climate-controlled caves, maybe we'll grow food in test tubes, but that wouldn't look anything like Earth as we now know it. It would look a lot more like Newt Gingrich's moon colony, assuming any human beings, or at least enough to make a civilization, survived in those circumstances. So, when I say climate change is simple, I know this has been bugging you. You're not used to thinking in Celsius. It's strange European metric temperatures. So here's good American Fahrenheit. It's just as ugly. So this is what I mean by climate change being simple. There are many complicated and fascinating discussions to be had about what to do about it, or about what effect our actions might have on the climate and when, or which policies are best based on cost-benefit analysis. There's complexity, plenty of complexity for those of you who like complexity. But we now know to a fair degree of certainty that if we keep doing what we're now doing, we will face unthinkable catastrophe. That's the bumper sticker, that's the take-home message. And that, saying, I don't want to talk about that because I don't know the ins and outs is like saying, I don't want to raise alarms about Hitler's army being 100 miles out because I don't know the thread count of their uniforms, or I don't know the average calorie intake of a German soldier. You don't need to know those things to be scared that the army's on the march and to raise alarms about it. Similarly, if we keep doing what we're now doing, we are screwed. This we know now. To stabilize temperature, and I don't mean stabilize temperature at 2 degrees or 4 degrees or 6 degrees, I mean to ever have a hope of ever again having a stable temperature of any kind, global climate change emissions need to peak, stop growing, peak, and start falling rapidly in the next 5 to 10 years. Every year we do not get started on this, we add, according to the International Energy Agency, an extra $500 billion with a B dollars to the price tag of what it's going to cost us to do this eventually. Every year we wait, that's $500 billion down the drain. Now, you and I look around at current politics, particularly US politics, and massive, coordinated, intelligent, ambitious action does not strike us as particularly plausible. In fact, it might strike us as impossible. But that is where we are, stuck between the impossible and the unthinkable. So your job, anyone who hears this, for the rest of your life, your job is to make the impossible possible. Thank you.
It's time.